If you fit into that dress, I will marry you.
If you can fit in that dress, I'll marry you. The remarks cut through the ballroom like a knife covered in laughter. Even the music stopped for a moment. People looked. Cameras went up. There she was, Nariah Blake, a young black waitress standing still next to a silver plate, her hands shaking, and her gaze caught in the spotlight she never asked for. Kareem Al-Masri, an Arab CEO whose name was whispered with both envy and horror in Chicago's elite circles, was the guy behind the laughs. He held up his glass to a red designer dress that was on display in the middle of the hall. It was valued at about $900,000. Come on, he continued with a sneer. If you can fit into that, I'll marry you right now. Everyone in the crowd started laughing. Some people clapped. People's phones went up, flashes went out, and someone yelled, "Oh, this is going right to Instagram." They said it was a prank, but that wasn't hilarious for Nariah. Every laugh hurt her chest. The white gold chandeliers made her dark complexion burn, and her grin, which used to light up every room, turned into something weak. At that moment, she wasn't a human. She was the punchline. She wished she could dissolve and become part of the marble floor. But when she turned to the service entrance, something inside her changed. The shame didn't break her. It made her stronger. No one in that sparkling room, including Kareem, knew that Nariah was more than just a waitress. She used to be a fashion student, someone who dreams, a warrior, a woman with a fire that had been buried for years. This black story wasn't going to end in disgrace. It was set to turn into one of the biggest comebacks ever. You are watching Hidden Worth, where every story shows us that courage is what makes us valuable, not money, fame, or size. So, before we go on, please take a second to subscribe. What you're going to hear will revolutionize how you think about power, privilege, and what real beauty looks like. Let's start now. Before the dress, in front of the cameras, Nariah Blake was merely a girl with rough hands, a tired grin, and a quiet dream sewn into the corners of her heart before the humiliation that would make her name go worldwide. She grew up on the south side of Chicago, in an area where staying alive was more important than following your ambitions. Nariah's mother, Janice, worked double shifts at a nursing home. Even as a youngster, Nariah knew how to reheat leftovers without asking, and how to make the last gallon of milk last the whole week. Even though there was a lot of commotion outside, Janice always made room for beauty in their flat. They didn't have much, but they did have fabric. Their neighbors gave them yards of second-hand cloth, and Nariah's grandmother gave them a dusty Singer sewing machine. That's where it all began. Nariah made her first garment out of an old curtain panel when she was 10. It was crooked and awkward, but Janice cried when she showed it to her mom. Not because it was flawless, but because it made her think of how her kids saw color in a world that was too frequently gray. Nariah's portfolio was good enough to get her a full scholarship to the Chicago Institute of Design by the time she was 17. Her teachers said she was a natural. Her peers said she was brave. She worked part-time, went to school at night, and dreamed of starting her own fashion line for women who looked like her. Bold, curvy, and proud to be black. But then the stroke happened. Just 2 semesters before Nariah's graduation, her mother fell to the floor in the kitchen. There was no coverage, no extra money, no extended family to help out. Nariah dropped everything. School, internships, dreams. She became a full-time caretaker and worked evenings at a hotel in the city to pay for physical therapy and keep the lights on. No one at the hotel knew that Nariah used to draw gowns that cost more than the ones on display. She poured champagne or picked up crystal cups that irresponsible millionaires had left behind. Patterns, seams, and collections that she never finished lived behind her silent gaze. And every night, after putting her mother to bed, she would silently open a journal full of outfit ideas and agony that she couldn't talk about with anybody else. Now she couldn't be seen, a nobody in polyester. But she had never ceased designing on the inside. She had barely stopped for a moment. And sometimes, a pause is merely the calm before the storm. It was meant to be simply another shift on the night of the Gold Light Towers charity gala. Another night of balancing trays and keeping her mouth shut. Nariah had been to a lot of events like this before. There were ballrooms full of gold, women in gowns that could pay someone's rent for a year, and guys who acted like the world owed them an apology for not being impressed enough. But this night felt heavier, louder, and sharper. She had seen the clothing as soon as she stepped in. It was impossible to miss. The red gown hung in the air on a spinning platform and sparkled like a secret in the light of a circle of spotlights. A French designer named Laurent Devereaux, whose name was well known in fashion journals and whispered discussions, made it just for this auction. 2 sizes. Crystals sewn by hand. A neckline that looks like marble. What does it cost? Almost $900,000. Naraya couldn't help but look. Not because she wanted to wear it, no. Not then, but because she could see how it was made. The lining, the cut, and the weight. She could see how long it took. The hands that sewed. The theory behind the shadow. It was a work of art, and she missed being a part of that environment. At that time, she was lost when she heard it. "I'll marry you if you can fit into that dress." The voice was loud and full of wine and pride. Karim Al-Masri, the millionaire CEO of Atharian Industries, owned it. He was in the middle of the room, with investors and models all around him. He wasn't paying attention to the dress. He was staring at Naraya. A break, then laughs. First a small wave, then a big one. People who were there turned their heads, recognized who the joke was about, and laughed even harder. People picked up their phones. Flashes went off. Hashtags were made in real time. Naraya stood there, motionless, the tray still in her grasp. She didn't know what hurt more, her face or the fact that people didn't even bother to hide how funny they thought it was. Someone close to her said, "That dress costs more than her life." She held on to the tray more tightly. Her heart beat so loudly that it drowned out the music. Her throat got tight, but she wouldn't weep. Not here, not in front of them. Karim lifted his glass again. "Come on, someone get her a measuring tape. Let's sign a prenup right now." More laughing, more eyes, more knives that can't be seen. Naraya turned around, walked down the staff hallway, and went through the service entrance. But when the door closed behind her, cutting off the sound of mocking, something inside her didn't break, it got sharper. She was embarrassed, but she was still there. That meant she still had a choice. The staff bathroom was small, not much larger than her outstretched arms. The mirror was shattered, and the fluorescent light flickered and buzzed like a warning. Naraya stood in front of the sink, holding the edge of the porcelain with her fists and making her knuckles white. Her chest rose and fell, but not because she was crying. She hadn't allowed herself to cry. Not yet. She looked at the woman in the mirror. Her cheeks were red, her curls were messy under a cap, and her eyes were damp but burning. This wasn't the version of herself that she wanted to see. This girl didn't dream in lace and fabric like she used to. This wasn't the girl who drew pictures of dresses in the margins of her books. This was someone who felt embarrassed, pulled down, and trapped. And yet, I'm still here. Naraya took off her name tag and put it on the sink. There was big, plain writing that said, "Staff, no name, no story, just a tag." She let out a slow breath, again, until the shaking in her lungs stopped. That night, something changed deep inside her. It wasn't loud or spectacular. Be quiet, like a lock clicking shut. She didn't leave in a hurry. She didn't yell. She gazed in that mirror and made a commitment. She muttered, "I won't let them define me," in a quiet but steady voice. Not by how big I am, not by my skin, not by this uniform. She cleaned her face with a rough paper towel, folded it up nicely, and threw it away. Her shoulders rolled back. Straightened spine. She went on, "I'm not coming back for a man. I'm coming back for me." And with those words, a plan began to take shape. Not a plan for revenge, but a plan for recovery. They thought she would be the punchline, but she wasn't. She would be the twist in the story that they never saw coming. She left the bathroom the same way she came in, with the same clothes and the same job. But something had changed. Her steps were heavy. There was a reason for her silence. Karim Al-Masri had made a show of her in front of everyone. He had made fun of her in front of hundreds of people, turning her life into a horrible joke. But he didn't get that some fires don't destroy. They make things stronger. Naraya didn't go home and break down that night. She went home and started to put things back together. Not only her body, it's not simply her name, her strength. Naraya put on a pair of sneakers that had seen better days the next morning, before the sun even came up. They weren't meant to be run in. The soles were worn out, and the laces were coming apart. But those were all she had. And at that moment, having something, anything to start with, was enough. She walked 3 blocks to the sole gym in her area that was open 24 hours a day. There was no membership information inside, just a flickering neon sign that said, "Grit," between a pawn shop and a cheap booze store. No towels with smells, a room full of rusty weights, machines that don't match, and bodies moving around in mute desperation. Naraya paused at the door, not sure what to do. That's when she met Michelle. Michelle used to be a Golden Gloves boxer, but now she's a personal trainer who won't put up with excuses. She was in her early 40s, built like a tank, and wearing a t-shirt that said "Strength is earned." She saw Naraya pausing at the door and walked up with her arms crossed. "First time?" she asked. Naraya nodded. "I have 30 days," she remarked, "to fit into a dress." Michelle lifted an eyebrow. "Why would you do that?" Naraya thought for a moment. "Because someone told me I couldn't." Michelle looked at her for a long second. Then she smiled slowly. "Good. I really don't like folks like that." Michelle became her rock from that day on. 5 in the morning, sharp, every day. No easy ways out, no pity. Naraya was doing more than simply working on her body. After cleaning hotel rooms and taking care of her mother at night, she sat down at her ancient laptop, which had a damaged screen and a sticky keyboard, and started digging. Not only videos about fitness or fashion advice, she looked up Karim Al-Masri. She read every press release and article. There was no dispute about the man. Not dirty enough, too careful. She still found cracks, though. Old complaints from employees that inexplicably went away. A charity that was registered under more than one name. An ex-assistant who got rid of all of their social media 2 years ago. She wrote things down. She put together folders. She began a private blog with a fictitious identity to keep track of everything she found. Not to tell him. Not yet. But to really get to know him, you had to look past the money and the polished appearance. It wasn't only about getting back at them for every rep at the gym, every click of the keyboard, and every restless night. It was about getting something back. Not simply how big she is, not her honor. The narrative of her. It wasn't about fitting into a dress. It was about showing that she still had control over her story. And if Karim thought that was the end of her in the ballroom, he was going to learn that this was only the beginning. Karim Al-Masri seemed unbeatable on the outside. Along with international leaders and IT giants, he was the face of global philanthropy on magazine covers. One headline read, "The Modern Oil King." Another said, "A billionaire with a heart." He gave money to initiatives that provided clean water, constructed schools in poor nations, and gave speeches about equality at black tie occasions where the only thing different was the wine list. But Naraya knew better. That's because when someone's picture is that beautiful, it's usually hiding something. So she looked deeper. She began with business filings. Aetherion, Karim's energy company, had more shell companies than workers. Each subsidiary led to another maze of names, addresses, and well-timed dissolutions. A former tax auditor had once noticed a strange pattern of offshore activity, but the report disappeared after the agency got a donation for its restoration fund. After that, she looked at people. Savina Morel was a name that showed up twice, once as Karim's executive assistant, and again in an anonymous Glassdoor rating that just warned, "Beware. The smile hides a monster." The message was taken down a few days later, but Naraya had already saved it. A friend from her old design school days helped her find Savina. They met in a little cafe in Lincoln Park that wasn't too busy. Savina seemed nervous and kept an eye on everyone who came in. Naraya thought she was in her early 30s, but she was actually in her early 30s. She had a tense kind of grace, like someone who has learned to be elegant under strain. "Why are you interested in him?" "Why?" Savina said without any niceties. Naraya didn't move. "Because he made me feel bad. And I don't think I'm the first." Savina's eyes got a little softer. She took a drink of her coffee and then leaned forward. "You're not, but you could be the first to do something about it." And just like that, the door opened a little. Savina told how Karim kept things quiet. NDA agreements that were larger than legal textbooks, threats to ruin careers, and lawyers who were good at scaring people. Every woman who sought to speak out was either buried in paperwork or paid off before a murmur could become a headline. But now that Naraya's tale is getting more attention online, hashtags like #RedDressDare and #BlackStoryJustice are starting to trend. Savina felt a change. She said, "It's not just about him. It's about how many people he has shut up." And Naraya realized that if she wanted to know the truth, she would have to find the others. Monsters like Kareem don't work alone. They do well in silence. It was time to make some noise. Savina didn't waste time with fake pity. She didn't want to talk about her anguish again for the sake of drama. She wanted things to be different, change for real. Naraya did too. Savina introduced Naraya to 3 other women that same night, in a dark apartment above a closed bookstore on the west side. They all had a story to tell. Each of them has been through something that most people wouldn't believe. Camille was there. She used to be the marketing director at Ethereum, but she left when Kareem kept trying to get her to go out with him. People in the industry secretly banned her name and said she left because of a performance issue. Then Lena, a systems engineer, showed up. She had written down how Kareem used business resources to stifle whistleblowers, but her files were deleted, and she couldn't get into them again overnight. She got a 5-figure payment that she never touched in exchange for her quiet. And finally, Ria, a quiet woman in her late 40s, used to run Kareem's private charity. She had seen it all, from fake charities to donations that were way too high. Security took her out the day she asked about the books. They found each other again in that small living room, where the tea was lukewarm and the tension was thick enough to cut. They were no longer victims, but a unit. Naraya was the last to speak. "I don't have a name, or a court case, or a stage. I'm just a waitress who got laughed at," she replied, her voice firm. "But they did it in public, which was a mistake." The room got quiet. Camille then nodded. "That's what they aren't good at. They got used to it." Savina took out a folder. There were papers within, like copies of NDAs, pay stubs, and old corporate memoranda. "We've been gathering these, in a quiet way, waiting for the right time," Ria said. "But without visibility, it's just paper. It needs a face, a tail." Naraya looked them in the eye, and for the first time, she didn't feel little. She didn't think it was funny. She felt like a spark. "We tell them the story," she said. "It would be hard." They were up against money, power, and influence. But something was different. Kareem's PR staff no longer had influence over the story. They owned it now. And at that moment, with 4 women from 4 different parts of Kareem's empire sitting next to each other, a strategy began to take shape, not only to call him out, but to tear down the whole image he had built his authority on. Because one woman with nothing to lose is the only thing more dangerous. There were 4 of them, working as a team. Naraya's reflection had started to change by the 4th week. Her face seemed thinner. The way her clothes fit changed. Now, her stride had a purpose. It wasn't burdened down by shame or tiredness. But it wasn't just her physique that was altering. It was how she carried it. It was Michelle who saw it first. She saw Naraya hit the heavy bag harder and with more attention during their early morning workout. Her breathing was regular, and her figure was crisp. One morning, after a tough workout, Michelle threw her a towel and asked, "Do you still care about the dress?" Naraya stopped. "I don't know," she answered in all honesty. It was never about the dress. But the clothing had come to mean something, not of beauty, not of proof, but of defiance. Michelle gave Naraya a bag of clothes 30 days after the gala. Inside was the dress, which was a copy that a boutique that had followed her tale online had lent her. Same designer, same shape, same size that can't be done. Naraya took a deep breath and walked into it. And it worked. Not perfectly, she still had to pull on the zipper, but it fit her body in a way that was honest. No photoshopping, no sculpting by private chefs, or cosmetic surgery. A body that has worked, fought, and lived. She stood in front of the mirror and ran her fingers over the fabric, following the seams. She grinned for a second. Not because of how she looked, but because of how hard it was to get here. Every rep, every bruise, every insult that was ignored. But the pride didn't last long. This wasn't the win she was looking for. This was only a stop along the way. Michelle came in and put her back against the door. "You did it," she said. Naraya turned with her eyes on the prize. Not yet. What mattered now wasn't whether the dress zipped up. She was about to do something in it. Kareem didn't want to lose weight, gain muscle, or have a glow. She didn't do it to get praise or show she was worthy. It was armor. And Naraya wasn't getting ready for a fashion show. She was getting ready for battle. The clothing was more than just a gown. It was a message. And the woman who wore it? She may be seen now. The message came just when Naraya felt she had put all the pieces of the puzzle together. She forwarded it to a burner account she had made weeks before to keep an eye on Kareem's online activity. There is no subject line, no signature. There are only a few lines of text and an attachment. I saw what happened to you. I used to be his employee. You're not the only one. He has more adversaries than you might believe. Take a look at this. There was an audio file attached. Naraya's heart raced as she plugged in her headphones and hit play. At first, it was just noise. Then there were voices, two men, one of whom was unmistakably Kareem. The sound was fuzzy, as if it had been recorded through a wall or a pocket, but there was no doubt that Kareem was being rude. His voice continued. Ruin her if she doesn't back down. Find out where she lives, who she talks to, and what scares her. Everyone has a flaw. We'll make her stop talking. There was a pause, and then a second voice, unsure. She's just a server. Kareem laughed. And that's why no one will care. Naraya froze. It wasn't just being mean, it was planned. This wasn't about a joke gone too far. It was about a man who had constructed an entire career out of smashing anything that challenged his image. And now she had proof. She sent the file to Savina right away, and Savina listened in shock. This changes everything, Savina said. You just took off the mask, but the message wasn't done yet. 2 hours later, I got a second email. The same person sent it, a name this time. Elijah Kane, Ethereum's former IT manager. He was fired 6 months ago after making an internal complaint that never went anywhere. They met 2 days later at a food truck by the lake. Elijah was young and scared, and he kept looking over his shoulder. But after Naraya earned his trust, he let her in. He told her about the server that was concealed, the archives that are encrypted. The fire insurance folder was full of files that Kareem used to blackmail and silence anyone who crossed him, including employees, investors, and even politicians. But here's the thing, Elijah continued as he slipped a flash drive across the table. He backed up everything, and I created a copy before they took away my access. Naraya looked at the little drive as if it were shining. She had all she needed inside this inch of plastic. Not just her narrative or Savina's, but the reality about a man who had been in charge for too long without anyone knowing it. Now, the shadows were working against him. This was no longer just a story. It was a time to pay. They didn't have a public relations team, no attorneys, no press ties or business sponsors. But they had something stronger. The truth. Naraya realized that if they wanted the world to hear it, they had to do more than just murmur. They had to create a lot of noise to break the silence. So the idea came to be, half planning and half desperation. They dubbed it the mirror moment. It was a single night, a single occurrence, and a single public encounter meant to show Kareem's carefully manufactured image back to him shattered. The chance came up sooner than intended. A follow-up event is planned for exactly 1 month after the iconic red dress incident. The same hotel, the same people are coming, same light. It was the second part of the charity auction, and there was even more media coverage because of unexpected viral interest. Of course, Kareem would be there. People would follow him with cameras. Live streams would show all that happened. And the red dress, yes, that garment, was going to be auctioned off again as the main event of the night. Naraya saw it for what it was, a great staging. Naraya, Savina, Camille, Lena, and Ria all crowded around a whiteboard in the little living room where they originally met, like generals at war. They planned out every detail, including who would be inside, who would video, who would handle uploading to social media, and how the files from Elijah's drive would be made public. Ria remarked, "This has to hit all at once. There's no time to clean up." Savina said, "If we can make it popular in the first 10 minutes, it won't matter how many lawyers he sends it." Naraya nodded. She would be the face. She had been publicly humiliated, so it was only fair that she take the stand when the curtain fell. But this time, she wouldn't go in as a waiter. She would come in wearing the dress, the one they made fun of her for, the one they told her she could never fit into, the one that was a sign of humiliation and would now be the armor of truth. They rented camera equipment, made fake accounts so they could send out the video. A close friend of Camille's, who works in the media, decided to go undercover and break the story live. The script says everything, every second, and every disclosure. Naraya stood in front of them, calm and focused. "We don't ask for respect," she stated. "We take it. In front of everyone. Because this wasn't just a gimmick for the news. It was a reclaiming of voices, of tales, of value. And when that ballroom lit up again, it wouldn't be to celebrate money. It would be to see a falsehood fall. The ballroom looked just like it did a month ago, with gleaming floors, chandeliers dripping light, and a crowd of people wearing diamonds and egos. Laughter rang out over the champagne glasses. Camera crews gently circled, getting glam shots for the next day's news. The dress was in the middle of it all, on a glass mannequin under golden lights. That dress in red, the identical one that had been used against her, the one that caused the storm. No one saw Naraya come in. She didn't come in a limo or with a group of famous people. She got out of a rideshare on the corner, alone, wearing a black coat and looking serene like a silent storm. The dress was under the coat, fitted, not sorry. People turned their heads as she walked across the ballroom, her shoes reverberating on the marble floor. At first, they were confused, but then they knew. Whispers spread like a fire. "That's her. The waitress in the video." Karim stood behind the bar with investors and socialites on either side of him. He lost his smile as soon as he saw her. It was small, like a twitch in his jaw or a tightening of his hold on his glass. Naraya, on the other hand, saw it. She walked right up to him. "Do you remember me?" she asked, her voice calm and steady. Karim looked around the room with his gaze. He laughed uncomfortably. "Of course. You look different." She turned her head. 30 days. "You promised." "I did what I said I would do." People gasped with shock. The phones were already recording. The webcast went up by the second. The crimson outfit sparkled like a flame blowing in the wind. "Don't make this a scene," Karim said quietly as he got closer. Naraya pulled a flash drive out of her purse and said, "Oh, but it is a scene, and every show needs a big reveal." The screen in the ballroom, which was supposed to show the auction totals, suddenly went blank. Messages, files with sound, private notes. The recording played, and Karim's voice was clear and unmistakable. "If she doesn't give up, ruin her." There was silence, then whispers, then anger. Savina, Camille, Lena, and Ria all came out of different parts of the room. One by one, they went forward, each with a folder of proof. A group of survivors who are no longer hiding. Security guards appeared, not for Naraya but for Karim. A few minutes later, the police showed up. Naraya stood in the middle, unshaken, as Karim Al-Masri was led out of the ballroom, his empire falling apart behind him. The internet went crazy. Hashtags were popular all across the world in just a few hours. News anchors rushed to get soundbites. The hosts of late-night shows showed the video again, the time a waitress brought down a billionaire. And in the middle of all the noise, a truth rang out louder than the fall. When reality walks in wearing the dress you made fun of, power means nothing. And this time, people all across the world were paying attention. By morning, Karim Al-Masri's name was no longer trending because of his wealth or attractiveness. Instead, it was trending because of the controversy that broke overnight. Billionaire CEO exposed live at charity gala, and the dress that brought down a dynasty were just two of the headlines that kept coming. 3 big companies ended their agreements with Atherion Industries in less than 48 hours. The prices of stocks fell sharply. The board of directors of Karim's company called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to fire him as CEO. His accounts were locked. His lawyers stopped talking. His formerly impregnable image broke wide open, sending truth across every platform with a signal and a heartbeat. There were investigations that followed. The federal government got involved. People who blow the whistle were given protections. Former employees filed a lot of lawsuits. Journalists who had been afraid of getting in trouble for speaking out disclosed devastating findings they had been sitting on for years. Every part of Karim's empire, his businesses, his charities, and his offshore investments was looked at extremely closely. The guy who used to laugh from the podiums now hid behind locked doors, but the ladies he tried to bury stood up. Savina founded a non-profit to help women in the workplace who are being harassed. Camille became a public speaker and talked to college students about ethics at work. Ria, who was the quietest of the group, found her voice writing editorials for national newspapers on how important it is for charities to be open about their money. And Naraya? She returned to the Chicago Institute of Design. The institution gave her a full scholarship to finish what she had started. She agreed, but only on her own conditions. She wasn't just a student anymore. She stood for something. A living reminder that you don't build resilience when things are easy. You build it when things are hard. Fashion companies got in touch. Editors of magazines wanted to talk to people. But Naraya stayed true to herself. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to make a difference. She started her own brand, Hidden Worth, which is not just for bodies but also for tales. What was her first collection? 12 dresses. Each one was inspired by a woman who was there for her during the fight. The museum got the red garment as a cultural item, not as a piece of clothing. It was a reminder that one act of bravery can take away power. Naraya's mother, who was now stronger thanks to therapy paid for by donations, watched the news about her daughter's story in a quiet apartment on the south side. Her eyes filled with tears, not from despair, but from astonishment. Because her daughter, who used to make outfits out of discarded curtains, had just changed the very idea of justice, not with rage, but with honesty, patience, and a storm in red. People stood up before Naraya's name was even called on the day she graduated. Professors who had seen her disappear came back to celebrate. Her mother, who was seated in the front row with a cane in one hand and tissues in the other, cried a lot. Michelle, the trainer who helped her get stronger, stood in the back with her arms crossed and chin up, looking proud. That day, Naraya didn't wear the red dress. Instead, she donned one of her own that was soft blue, cut unevenly, and had few seams. Clean, truthful, hers. The room grew quiet when they gave her the microphone. She started. For a long time, I thought I had to make myself smaller to be taken seriously. That I had to fit into a dress, an appearance, and a version of myself that made other people feel good. She stopped for a while to look around the room. But I've learned that you don't have to change who you are to get respect. It's about being so sure of your truth that no one can change it. There was a lot of noise, but Naraya raised her hand to ask for quiet. This isn't just my tale. This is a story for everyone who has ever felt small. For everyone who has been looked down on because of their body, their background, or their silence. She smiled softly. They called it a black story. That made it a niche. It made it seem less universal. But the truth is that everyone has a right to our experiences, our grief, and our achievements. A young woman stood silently near the exit after the wedding. She was only 18 and had a notebook clutched to her chest. I saw your video, she continued, her voice shaking. I was going to quit, but then I saw you. Naraya didn't ask for her name. She didn't have to. She merely opened her arms and hugged her like someone who had once needed that same hug. Because healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in the small decisions, like the choice to keep going, to stand up, and to speak out. And sometimes, it starts with the choice to quit trying to fit in. If this tale touched you, or if you've ever felt like no one saw you or thought you were less than you are, send this video to someone who needs to hear it. Sign up for Hidden Worth to get more stories that remind us that we don't have to change to be enough. You are already. They don't know what you are. You are what you choose to be.